Hi, everybody. Welcome to our April Wireside Chat. I'm Paul Wickover, the Associate Dean of the Online MFA, and I'm joined tonight by my co-host, Melissa Hart. Hi, Melissa.
Hey.
And our special guest, Nicole Melleby.
Hey.
Hi, Nicole. I'm going to give you a little introduction, and then we'll just jump right in.
All right, sounds good.
So, everyone, Nicole, a born and bred Jersey native, is an award winning. Whereabouts in New Jersey were you born, Nicole?
I have born and still am in Central Jersey, right by the shore.
Oh, okay, by the shore, down the shore. All right. A born and bred Jersey native is an award-winning children's author. Her works have been Junior Library Guild Gold Standard selections, listed as best books of the year by Bank Street Books, Kirkus Reviews, and Publishers Weekly, and have been ALA Rainbow Book Selections, a Lambda Literary Finalist, and listed on the CCBC Choices and ALA Notable Book Lists. She lives with her wife and their cat, whose need for attention oddly aligns with Nicole's writing schedule. Yeah, a lot of times cats seem to be opposed to writing. They're always sprawling all over the keyboard and trying to keep you from doing your work. Nicole had a book come out recently, a middle grade book, Winnie Nash Is Not Your Sunshine, that came out last May. And she actually has a middle grade anthology that she co-edited that's coming out this May, just next month, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And her next middle grade novel is called Brady Mason's Perfect Fit, and that's coming out in January 2026. Yeah, so I am excited to welcome Nicole to this month's Wireside Chat.
Yeah.
But right before I started recording, Melissa had mentioned that she had written a book that was a compilation of YA books or middle grade books that are important because they sort of help kids learn about empathy. And one of Nicole's books was like at the top of her list.
Yeah, Hurricane Girl. You have the poster, I think, behind you.
Yeah, right behind me.
Yeah.
That's a cool title. What's that book about?
So that book is 12-year-old Fig is, or I think she's 11, is living with her at the time undiagnosed father with undiagnosed bipolar disorder, and her whole thing is that she tries to find a way to connect to him through art. So it's kind of a story about their relationship and how they kind of connect with each other.
Yep. Is he like a single dad?
Yeah, he's a single dad. They live on the Jersey Shore. He is kind of obsessed with the weather and hurricanes specifically. So Fig is terrified of hurricanes, and that's
Gotcha.
where the title comes in. But yeah, the journey is kind of the two of them together, learning how to, speaking of empathy, kind of learning how to empathize with one another and figure out how to make their little family succeed.
Yeah, that sounds great. I want to invite everyone to, as we have our conversation tonight, to post any questions, comments that you might have into the chat. Melissa and I will be keeping an eye out, and we'll raise them up and ask them to Nicole so that she can answer. So Nicole, you mentioned that you're born and still reside in Jersey on the shore. This book is on the shore, set on the Jersey Shore. Do you often set your work in that area?
Yeah, so all of my books take place in the small little centering towns of where I'm from and where I grew up. And they're all set around those areas, so they're all on some kind of shore town in New Jersey. And in my third book, How to Become a Planet, they run a pizzeria on the boardwalk called Timony's Pizzeria, and that pizza place actually is in every single one of my books, starting with my first book, even though it came out 2 books later, because I had already had a manuscript of it in progress. I was able to put the pizza in every single one of my published books. So everyone eats pizza at this fictional pizza place on the boardwalk.
That is so cool.
Yeah, I put a lot of other kind of Easter eggs in all my books. Sometimes I think I'm the only one who knows they're there, but they make me happy, so I guess that's all that matters.
That's
Um,
right.
yeah, and I also, I put places that are important to me or were important to me growing up. Winnie Nash goes to Asbury Park Pride, and it's one of our local Pride ceremonies down here. Um, in a couple of my books, they eat at a diner that my dad and I used to go to all the time. So it's fun to set stories in my own kind of town because you get to kind of I play a little more than maybe I
Right.
would if I was writing about a place I didn't know.
Right. Do you ever have characters from one book that play a peripheral role in another book?
I sometimes I do. There's a couple of characters in there's a character in my first book that makes a really brief appearance in my second book. And there's a couple of little things like that I try and sneak in every so often to see if anyone picks up on it.
Right.
Sometimes every so often I'll have a kid email me and be like, "Is it the same?" And I'll be like, "Yes, it's the same, it's the same person."
That's so great.
Yeah, I have a lot of fun doing things like that. I know a lot of authors sometimes set completely different, but I have a lot of fun setting them in the same like three towns. My characters deal with a lot of, like mental health issues and whatnot, so a lot of them end up in therapy, and it's the same therapist in all the books.
Sorry.
So she's getting a lot of business from me, I guess, but a lot of fictional business. But no, they're all the same therapist. So.
So do you give your area that the kind of three towns that feature in your novels, have you bestowed like a fictional name upon them, like your own Yoknapatawpha County or something like that?
I actually use real locations for the most
Uh-huh.
part. I lean right into it. So there was one, my second book takes place, she goes to a Catholic school, in the role of Bree Hutchins is that book. She goes to a Catholic school. I went to a Catholic school. And I didn't want to use my Catholic school because I didn't want anyone, I didn't want to, make a to-do about it. So
You didn't want to upset the nuns.
yeah. So I used a Catholic school in the area that actually had closed down a while ago. So it had existed, but it doesn't anymore. But everything else is I just I use the real places, the real names. And it's funny because I remember in one of my books I mentioned the Count Basie Theater, which is a theater in Red Bank by me. And the copy editor had said something like, actually, it's called, and like the long title that it was actually called. And I was like, but no one calls it that, so
Right.
I'm not gonna do that. But that's always funny because the copy editor, for those of you who haven't been through the whole process, the copy editor is kind of one of the last stages where they go in and really make sure that all your grammar is correct, that everything's stylized to the way the publisher wants it, and whatnot, and they fact check you as well. And every so often they'll be like, well, actually, I think it's this, and I'm like, well, I live here, so I promise you it's not. And Winnie Nash, she takes a train from Red Bank into the city, and my copy editor was like, it looks like the price would be this much. And I was like, I literally just went last weekend. Here's my receipt. Like, it was this much. So they do their best, but they're not
Right.
gonna have the information that they just do the research on. But I know I live here, so I
Right.
guess in that terms too, if you're a writer and you don't want to do all the extra nitty gritty world building stuff, you can just write what you know. So.
Well, that's what they say, right? You're supposed to write what you know. How did you become? Tell us a little bit about your writing journey. Like, when did you know that you wanted to be a writer, and how did you pursue that as a career?
Yeah, so I'm one of those people who always knew that I wanted to be a writer. I was 8, and the Nickelodeon adaptation of Harriet the Spy came out. And so I saw that movie, and I had to. Ever since then, I would make my parents buy me composition notebooks every time I went to the store, and I would kind of hide and like take notes like I was spying like she did in the movie. And then that kind of lent itself to me writing like little stories about adventures me and my cousins would go on, and from there I just kind of kept writing, and that's how it started for me. when I got to high school, I wasn't really sure, like, if I guess writing could be a job. It wasn't that I was discouraged about it, but I wasn't necessarily, no one in my life really knew like that you could or that you should pursue it. So I didn't take it seriously after that. I tried to figure out what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until I was, out of college for a couple of years, still didn't know what I was doing, was kind of figuring out my place. And I sat back and I was like, okay, I need to get back to what I love. And that's when I started applying to MFAs then. And I didn't tell anyone I was applying to MFAs because I was like, oh, but like, what? I was never a great student. So I was like, what if I don't get anywhere? Like, I don't want anyone to know. But I got my MFA and it kind of helped me get back to what I love to do. And then from there, I just kept doing it.
That's awesome. And as both of you know, and everyone here knows who's currently a student in the MFA anyway. So many of our students have been on a very similar journey, right? They're coming back to their first love, and after trying to do other stuff, maybe successfully even, but just realizing something was missing. Well, what was it that drew you to middle grade and YA fiction specifically?
Yeah, it's like the favorite, but when I do school visits, the kids always ask, like why not write books for adults, or why do you write these books? And I wasn't always sure at first, but I think it's just I was really books meant so much to me growing up that I think writing for that audience more so than thinking it's not for me, it's not so much like writing the content that I want to write is middle grade, it's that I want to write for that audience. And I think just because when I was that age and I was that audience, it meant so much to me. So I like to be able to kind of capture that and think about them. I find middle grade and YA as well, for the most part, I find it's such an interesting category to write in because you have to think about your audience way more than any other age group, any other genre of writing, because it's for them first and foremost. It's not really about me. Writing a book for an adult, like, you don't necessarily have to think, and you probably shouldn't think like, what will my readers think? It's more, this is the book that I want, this is the story I want to tell, and I'm going to tell it and I'm going to enjoy it. But with writing for kids, you need to think about, what will they think? What do they need? So I think just remembering how important it was to me as that kid and wanting to keep doing that. I actually had thought though that I would, when I first went for my MFA, I was more young adult writing, but I ended up being published in middle grade. But I wrote my first middle grade book and it just felt so much more natural to me. So I don't know, I guess my natural voice is that of a 12-year-old. I don't know what that says about me, but it just kind of like clicked for me then. And so I just stuck with it. It just is something that I really love doing.
So when you're writing a middle grade novel, and I mean, really love what you said about, kind of wanting to write for that audience, because when you were that age, books were so important to you. Are you kind of consciously connecting back with your 12-year-old self and kind of remembering what it was like? How do you put yourself into the mindset of your readers?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think at first, I think the idea is that I was at first writing the stories that maybe I wish I had. I write stories about kids who are dealing with various mental health issues. I write stories about queer kids. And I think that at first it was definitely thinking about, okay, well, what would I have wanted when I was 12? And then I started doing school visits, and I started talking to the kids and the way that they speak and they come up to you. And it's just, I learned very quickly that what I needed as a 12-year-old isn't necessarily what 12-year-olds now need. And I think, I mean, I now, and it's funny because kids grow so fast, right? So at first, when I first started publishing, I was writing for Gen Z, and now it's Gen Alpha, and they're very different even in themselves. I mean, Gen Alpha has this whole language that I still have no idea sometimes what they're saying. And my godson, every so often, I have to like text him and be like, "What does this mean? What should I be saying?"
But it's good that you have an informant on the inside like that.
Yeah, I just learned that they don't say like, I'm going to Google that anymore. It's I'm going to search it up, because they don't
Search it up.
they don't go to Google. They pull it
Mm.
up on their phones, and I guess it's like search here or whatever. So yeah, they search it up. They don't Google. So I just learned that, so I had to start changing that. So I guess just being able to talk to kids and like to know who they are and to really like listen to my audience. I think someone in the chat said that, yeah, Palma Romero said in the chat that kids won't shy away from honest feedback. They do not shy away from telling you
Right.
everything they think. So if you're not thinking about them, they will be the first to let you know, like, this isn't right.
Mm.
So it's you have to be aware of that, and you have to kind of find a way to connect with that. And it really comes down to the fact that you're writing for kids, so you're going to do the school visits, you're going to get emails from kids, and it's just listening to them and being honest with them in response.
Yeah, and Melissa, you write middle grade too sometimes. So
sometimes.
how do your experiences with that jibe with what Nicole is saying?
Oh, wow. So it's been a couple of years since I wrote middle grade, and I didn't write for Gen Alpha. I think I'd be too intimidated. I don't think I know enough about Gen Alpha. But I absolutely agree that on school visits, they'll say, well, why did you make this choice instead of that choice? This choice makes much more sense. Why didn't you do it? They're painfully honest. Or, did you know you have a typo on page 122?
And you have to like admire them for it, that they're just so willing to come up to like an adult professional stranger and be like, I think you were wrong here, just so you know.
Totally.
Oh, when I told my wife that that we had a Wireside Chat tonight, and she asked, "Well, who's the guest?" And I was telling her, Nicole, about you and about your books and everything, and we got to talking about my stepdaughter. She was in middle grade territory when I first met her mom, and I was a part of her life from, I guess, the age of 8 or 9 onward. And we just started talking about all the books the middle grade books that she read. And I just remembered how important those books were for her. I mean, it wasn't just the book itself, it was the entire network of friends. It was like a culture, a shared culture that these kids, and my stepdaughter was a bit of a misfit, an outsider, and so were her friends. And this really gave them a way to have what they couldn't get anywhere else with each other. I mean, it was wonderful. And I often think, like, it's not as accessible anymore, those kinds of relationships through books once you get to be an adult. Yeah. They don't become like the center. They can't be the center of your world in the same way that they were back then.
Yeah. And it's interesting too to think about how you can talk about how like Gen Alpha has their own way of life, and you do have to speak to them in books, but the books that have been like timeless, that generations have read and over again. I always think like Charlotte's Web and A Wrinkle in Time, these books that obviously have outlasted and go beyond kind of the idea that something is outdated. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that those books are speaking to an age category, and knowing what that age, no matter when that is happening in what year, they're still going through a lot of the same things. And it's that emotional resonance and that kind of like emotional journey that these characters go on, that even if I'm a millennial and my godson's a Gen Alpha, that we both, when we were 12, can still understand. And those are the books that I think are the ones that become timeless, and they have a lot to do with just really being honest about just being honest in general, and really letting those emotional beats land.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Paul. I didn't mean to jump.
No, you go ahead.
I was just thinking about how when I was growing up, there was a middle grade novel, maybe it was young adult, by Betsy Byers called The Pinballs. Maybe one or two of you read this. And it really spoke to me as a maybe 13-year-old. It was about foster kids growing up in foster care in a foster home. I came from a pretty dysfunctional family, and I knew from as soon as I read The Pinballs, I knew without a doubt that if I had kids, I would adopt from the foster care system. And so I did. And I'm wondering, Nicole, was there a middle grade novel when you were a tween that was kind of formative for you?
Yeah, it's always a tough question because I always think of like so many things that I read and
Uh-huh.
grew up. I talk a lot about Kate DiCamillo and her books. So
Yes. Yeah.
Because of When Dixie came out when I was 11, and that the she what I and you know in years past I've learned a lot, but what Kate DiCamillo does in her books and what I think a lot of the books that I read growing up, A Bridge to Terabithia, Holes, a lot of those books
Hmm.
kind of touch on things that they're not worried about talking down to kids. They don't talk down to kids. And Kate DiCamillo has an essay that she put out that basically says like, let kids be sad. Kids are sad. They can be sad. Don't kind of shy away from that. Don't make it okay for them because maybe it's not okay for them. Just let them be sad. And those are the books and those kind of like really like honest and powerful ideas where it's like this kid is going through something and it's sad and it happens and it's okay. Like let them feel and let them exist in that. And so those are the books that always um, reached me the most. And I think what I took to heart as a writer myself. And it's not, everyone, sometimes people joke like, oh, you want you want people to read your books and be sad. And it's like, that's not really what it is. Because when I read a book that, allowed the sadness to happen, it didn't make me feel sad. It made me feel kind of at peace almost. And so I think that's really what was how the books formed for me as I grew up with reading. But yeah, we read a lot of the books that we read were really sad. The Bridge to Terabithia was devastating. Even Holes, which is a favorite of mine still. It's a heavy book. There's a lot of really intense things going on in that book, and it's short. It's only like 30,000 words. And it packs a hell of a punch, but it doesn't shy away. It just kind of lets its audience accept these things, and it's kind of what I try to do now. So I think that was the biggest influence on me.
Yep.
A lot of people chiming in the chat about love of these books and writers. So I think we're definitely reaching a chord with a lot of people today, which is great. One thing that I wanted to ask you about, Nicole, is so our program, offers YA. That's one of the genres that we cover, but we don't cover middle grade. So a lot of times writers come into the program and they're like, well, I'm not sure if my book is a middle grade or a YA. How do you know the difference? How do you tell the difference? What is the distinguishing characteristic? And can you turn a middle grade into a YA? Can you turn a YA into a middle grade? It's probably not as easy as one might think.
Yeah, I mean, obviously people are going to think, well, age, but that's not the only answer. I mean, yes, middle grade characters are characters between the ages of, let's say, 10 to 13, sometimes 14, and that's where it can get a little murky. And then YA is lately more like 16 to 18, sometimes 19, sometimes 15. So, it's that middle spot that sometimes gets confusing.
Mhm.
And this is what has stuck with me, but I heard this a while ago, that YA is, or let's say middle grade is a character kind of finding their place within their friends and family and the worlds that they're in, right? Because they're, let's say, 12. you don't have as many freedoms. So it's you're kind of finding your place within that confined and within that kind of restriction, and discovering who you are within that. And YA is you're starting to discover yourself outside of that. You're having more freedoms. You're learning who you are when you look outside of your friends and family and looking into the greater world. And I think that's a really simple but really effective way of looking at the differences between the two.
Yeah, and nowadays, of course, there's the new adult subgenre as well, which also
Yeah.
has this kind of like gray area, right? Like 18, 19
Yeah.
could go either way, right?
Yeah, and sometimes YA seems to go older. I just read a YA book that took place freshman year of college, which is also technically more new adult, but it's shelved as YA. I read a middle grade book recently. It was dual perspective. One of the characters was in 8th grade, but the other was in 9th grade, and so they're in high school, and most high school is YA and not middle grade. So I think there's ways to kind of play around with that. They're harder sells, like if you're going to talk market, but it's interesting because I think that there's, at the end of the day, there's really no right or wrong answer. That's kind of just looking at markets and shelf space.
Yeah, I mean, we have to look at it.
Yeah,
It's a reality that writers face. But just from the standpoint of marketing alone and the readership, there would be no reason, all things being equal, to choose YA over middle grade,
Yeah.
right? I mean, they're both genres with thriving readerships. Although one thing I kind of wonder about is, you often see YA books are very popular with adults.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you see that as much with middle grade.
No, I read once that I don't know if the numbers are still, they might be. I don't know if they're still as strong, but at one point, YA, like 50% of the people buying and reading YA were middle-aged women, I think was the actual category. But middle grade, it tends to be mostly kids. You'll get adult readers because by the nature of kids aren't buying the books, right? So the gatekeepers. So you have teachers, librarians, parents, and they're the ones who are buying the books. So sometimes you'll get readers that way with middle grade as adult readers, but for the most part, they tend to be the younger kids. And once they age into high school, you usually, if they love you and your work, if they're like, you're their favorite author, they'll keep reading. But once a kid hits the teenage, they might come back to middle grade, but they age out. So it's a never ending kind of, you're getting new readers all the time, which is also really fun. So that's.
But there's got to be like a little wistfulness and sadness to that cycle as well, right? Because you're like your readership kind of ages out. In a way, when you're. I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, they sometimes come back when they're older, but no, they do. They age out.
It's like Peter Pan, right? Because Wendy was waiting when she grew up to like introduce Peter to her children.
Yeah. No, so it's interesting because when you're talking about building a readership, again, if you're talking markets and promotion and whatnot, you're not really marketing yourself to the kids because they're cycling out, they're aging out. You're marketing yourself to the teachers, the librarians, and those are the ones who are going to be your lifelongers who will give your books to the kids. And so that's probably one of the biggest differences in something, at least.
And again, I'm sorry, go ahead, Melissa.
I just wanted to ask a question that came up in the chat about 15 minutes ago. Do you ever use a sensitivity reader? And if so, why?
Oh, that's a great question. It hasn't come up for me so much yet. My book that comes out in January is Brady Mason's Perfect Fit, and she is it's basically if the movie Annie met Devil Wears Prada. So it's a really interesting, she's a New Jersey orphan who ends up basically being her birth mother, she finds, and is her birth mother is basically the, Anna Wintour of this fake magazine I made up. And I did talk to, I didn't necessarily have a sensitivity reader for it because there is an element of the fantastical in a story like that. So it's not necessarily as real and nitty gritty as maybe like a real foster situation, but I didn't want it to not ring true either. But I spoke to, I asked questions of people that I knew who would know those answers. So I kind of went into my own inner circle of people that I trusted, and did research on that. Most of my books I write have a lot of my own identities and whatnot in them, so I'm writing from experience, but I have had friends who are writing from their experience but have secondary characters, so they have someone read that for them. I have a friend who is autistic and who wrote a story, but who wanted to make sure that their autistic experience wasn't that it rang true for someone else who wasn't them. So they had a sensitivity read, even though they shared that identity. So I haven't had to yet. I'm open to it if I need to, or if someone suggests it to me moving forward. It just is something that I haven't had to tackle yet because of the nature of what I'm writing.
Thank you.
Yeah, very, very interesting. That makes perfect sense.
Oh, can I ask you a question?
Do.
Have you had any books banned?
Yes, it is definitely something that comes up a lot lately. So I do write LGBTQ books for kids, and they have been on a lot of challenge lists. They come up a lot in the areas that you'd assume they would, like Florida. Ohio recently was one, but also there was a case in North Jersey a couple of years or last year that came up. A lot of the times, instead of being banned, it's kind of like a soft censorship, we call it, where your books will just get quietly removed from a library or school. Or something else that has been happening to a lot of us lately is we'll be getting ready to do a school visit, and everything will be looking like it's going to happen, and you're getting ready for this visit, and the school will cancel. A lot of schools these days, and this is something that I think speaks to a bigger, one of the bigger issues of book bannings, is a lot of schools aren't even taking the risk of inviting authors anymore. So now, regardless of the content of their book, even if it's just a book about ponies or something, they just don't want to take the risk that someone's going to have an objection to it. So not a lot of author visits are happening anymore. So, that's harming all kids, regardless, because you're not getting that kind of like one-on-one with an author that you could have. So yeah, it comes up a lot. I find that things happen in cycles, so it's, you want to keep pushing through. My co-editor so our book comes out in May. It's Athletes as a Gender. It's about queer athletes, everyone. So we have a whole bunch of both professional athletes and kidlit authors who are athletes contributed stories to this. We have Adam Rippon on here, Cece Telfer, who is a really great trans track runner. My co-editor, Catherine Locke, is currently, one of her books is actually in a case, in a SCOTUS case right now.
Wow.
Yeah, because there's a small handful, and so they've been dealing with that. I don't know what's going to happen with that yet, but it's all these kidlit books and whether or not they belong on the shelves or not. So yeah, it's been interesting because when I first started, it wasn't really an issue. Book banning so much, and my first book came out in 2019, so it wasn't even that long ago, and now it's like you can't really put a book out without it popping up on some list somewhere. So it changed really quickly, but these things do happen in cycles, so I'm hoping that we do bounce back, and as long as we keep being vocal about it, I think it'll I've always been kind of like, hopeful and optimistic about it, maybe more than I should be, but I think that we'll come back. It's not going to stop us from publishing these books and hopefully getting them in the kids' hands. So
Right. Yeah, I certainly hope so. I mean, how do you even find out if one of your books is being banned or removed from a library, especially if it's kind of done, as you say, quietly?
so it's hard to know sometimes. Every so often someone will hear and send me a link. Every so often I will get an uptick in nasty emails, let's
Oh
say.
boy.
So then I kind of know that it popped up somewhere, and then I'll look and find it. And that's always funny because people always ask, well, why don't you just close, like, why don't you, because I have a contact form on my website, and they're always like, well, get rid of it, like, just don't have the contact form. But for every nasty email, I get like 5 more from kids who are trying to reach out to me. So it's worth it to me. But yeah, it's little things like that that I usually find out that way. The quiet censorship, usually that you hear about just by word of mouth. When you're Because I write for kids and I talk to librarians and teachers all the time.
Right.
They find ways to let me know. I do the 2 big conferences, the ALA, the American Library Association conference, and NCTE, which is the National Council for Teachers of English. And when you go to these big conferences and just talk to the teachers and the librarians, they have a lot to say. They are going through a lot. So that's talking with them is mostly how I find out.
Yeah, one of our guests just put a link to the Queer Liberation Library in the chat. That looks like a great resource.
It's a great resource. Thank you for that, Emily.
So yeah, I mean, and I admire your your optimism in the face of it. I mean, I feel like, and I don't want to be all doom and gloom either, but I mean, it does seem like just for the arts in general, for queer arts and the writers and consumers, it's just a very scary time. So in a way, I can see that makes the need of these books because your audience is more desperate for them than ever. So I'm sure that must give you inspiration or courage to press on.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely makes me want to keep it. Some days it gets hard, but other days I know why I'm doing this and I know who I'm doing it for, and that helps. And it's kind of what I love to do. And I do know that like little things that you can do to kind of help these book bans is and really little positive ways. I know a big one is if your library happens to have like a little display of Pride books, let them know that you appreciate it. And those little things add up because a lot of the time, the people that are getting these books challenged, it's like they are the minority. The North Jersey one, it was 8 people from 2 families that caused this. So it's just 2 families out of all of the families in this, in this community. But they were the ones making the noise about it. So it's always the loudest people in the room. So if your library or your bookstore, your independent bookstores have these displays or are promoting these books, let them know how much you appreciate it because then you're the voice in the room as well. Same thing for schools. If you have, you have kids in a school or you're part of a school and someone has a pride flag or whatnot, let them know how much that means to you. And those little things add up in ways that I think people who are maybe too intimidated to do anything huge, like call a representative or get involved on the school board, that's not for everyone. And you can understand that, but there are these little things that I think that anyone can do. And that's usually what I encourage people to consider.
I want to invite people once again to post any questions that you may have for Nicole into the chat.
I have a question.
Okay, Melissa. No, you have to type it in the chat.
What's that? Oh, I have to type it in the chat?
No, you don't.
Oh, no, I'm not going to type it in the chat. I want to know, do you answer your hate mail?
I don't answer my hate mail. I ignore it. I delete it right away. So there, you're just kind of talking into the void if it comes at me. Um, I don't know if anyone else will ever be in this position, but I got the advice from um, an author friend of mine, Elliot Schrafer, who writes a lot of really, really great books. Highly recommended. He's a 2-time National Book Award finalist. He also writes queer books, and he had suggested on his website, it says something like, these emails are screened before they get to the author or whatever, and they're not. It just goes right to him. Mine go right to me, right to this inbox. But it's that like extra barrier that encourage, you go on to like hate someone. They're like, oh, they're not even going to see it. Why bother? Even though that's not true. And that actually helped a lot. It cut down the emails a lot. So once they realize that they're just going to be talking into the void, maybe they don't send them at all, even though it's not really that my emails aren't being screened. They're just coming right to me. But that was like the best advice because it's so simple. But
yeah. Melissa, your question makes me think that you perhaps do respond to your nasty emails.
Not usually. I mean, adjacent to that question, a local politician once wrote in after an op-ed that I had published. He wrote into the newspaper and they printed his letter to the editor, in which he referred to me as a greener than thou gutter snipe.
Oh my God.
So I didn't respond, but I thought that'd make a great band name.
I know.
Yeah. Gutter snipe. Wow.
Insult. Like
I would feel kind of proud to be called a gutter snipe.
I was kind of proud.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Greener than thou. Exactly right.
Don't answer your hate mail.
No, definitely not. Not worth. They're not here to listen, so it doesn't really matter.
Right, but I mean, related to that is the question of reviews. Mm-hmm. Do you read your reviews? Should you respond to like if you get a bad or unfair review? Is that something you should respond to?
I don't think you should ever respond to a bad review. I think reviews are for readers, and it's just a space that is for readers, and they're entitled to, once you publish a book, it is out there, it is not yours anymore. They're allowed to hate it for whatever reason. So I don't think you should ever respond to reviews. I do read reviews, and I know you're not supposed to, but I've never not. But they don't get me down. Like they don't. I know some authors who like just can't because it just puts them in a funk and then they can't write for weeks. And
right.
I've never been affected that way, so I think for me it's fine. I don't seek them out, but like if I see them, I'm like, ooh, let's see, what do you think?
Do you read yours, Melissa?
Yes. You're so not supposed to. Yeah, I do. How can you not?
Oh, it's so hard. I'm always so impressed when authors are like, no, I've never read a review. And I'm like, how are you have that kind of self-control?
I don't have that kind of self-control.
That's inhuman.
Yeah. How about you, Paul? Do you read yours?
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't like go on to Amazon or Goodreads or anything like that and read those, but I read but I do read, stuff. If I get a Publisher's Weekly or a Kirkus or something in a newspaper, I do read those. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of my favorite reviews actually does come from a Amazon review, which was better than it has any right to be.
What does that even mean?
I don't know, but I really liked it. I want to have that blurb on like all my books from now on.
That's so funny. There was, and it always makes me feel better because, reading is subjective. So like everyone's going to have different opinions. If you get a starred review, well, that you got that reviewer, but if another reviewer read it, maybe they would have hated it. But there's a Kirkus review of a picture book. I don't remember exactly what the picture book is called, but if you look this up, you should be able to find it. It's about a tugboat. And it's just a picture book about this tugboat. And this review in Kirkus rips this little picture book apart and is so funny because it's such a ridiculously like angry review over this like little simple picture book. So we passed that around a while ago because it was one of those things where it's like, this little simple book got this like raging review, and you're fine. Your bad review is fine. Like, it could be worse. You could be Tugboat. So.
Right. Well, they always say that Kirkus is the worst, right?
Yes, Kirkus is tough.
I mean, they're even Tugboat haters there.
Yeah, yeah.
Really?
Ugh.
Oh, that's awful.
But I just read recently that Publishers Weekly is going to start charging, or maybe they already have started charging for reviews, which I was kind of surprised to see.
Oh, wow.
And I know Kirkus also has like a kind of a pay per review. I don't know if all their reviews are done that way, but the review landscape seems to have changed in the sense that what was, the two major professional review organizations like Kirkus and PW, now, you have to pay to play. Whereas maybe places like Goodreads, for all the dangers involved, maybe that's a more authentic, I don't know, pipeline to readers, potential readers. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that charging, like, for those big trade reviews, I mean, those reviews get your books in front of so many people, and the more kind of barriers that they put up to that, the harder it's going to be to get that out there, and it's like, sucks, yeah.
And I imagine for like for like middle grade writers, it's got to be like the library journal, and places like that are super important.
Yeah, school library journals is a huge one for us. But we also do, Publishers Weekly, Kirkus, book list, all of the big ones.
Yep. So, you mentioned school visits. Are there like conventions and conferences that are solely devoted to middle grade, and are those the sorts of things that you attend?
Yeah, so the big ones I think are going to be like an ALA, which is the American Library Association, NCTE, the Teachers of English. Those are the big are the Kidlit publishers. I'll go to those and have booths and do signings, because again, you are promoting your books to the people buying the books are the librarians, the teachers, the parents. It's not necessarily the kids. And so that's really where our big conferences are. And we get to talk to the people who are on the grounds, kind of hand selling our books in ways that, because our audience isn't buying our books. And I always think that that's really fascinating too.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess that leads to my next question, which is, how do you make it as a middle grade writer? How do you break in?
I think that it starts with reading widely in the category, knowing what's out there, knowing what we're doing, kind of getting a sense of what librarians and teachers are asking for too, and kind of really understanding the audience a lot and what they need. Someone in the chat at some point was talking about reluctant readers. And that's huge. It's a big part of this is how do we get kids to read, and how do we get them to keep reading? How do we make readers? And I know right now a lot of that is, there are a lot of really long middle grade books, but I think right now there's a push for shorter middle grade books so that kids because even great middle grade readers sometimes will look at a book that's too thick and be like, nah, I can't do that. So the short books are great.
And what would be a short book? Because like earlier you mentioned Holds at being like 30,000 words or something.
Yeah, I think right now where the sweet spot is like 50,000 words for a middle grade book in this current market. My Brady Mason's Perfect Fit, I think, is 60 something. It's my longest. Most of my books don't even are around 50. And it had been a little longer, and during the last edit, it was basically about like, okay, how do we get this as close to the 50 mark as possible? And we couldn't, you can't cut everything, so we didn't get as close, but that was part of the edits this round, and that was the first time that had been a conversation. So it is something that they're being more deliberate about. But again, those are for contemporary middle grades. Your fantasies are going to have a little more room, a wiggle room, because they have more world building and whatnot. but yeah, so shorter books, on, around the 200-page marks is like a sweet spot right now that they're looking for middle grade. Yeah, so that's
Is
just
is it is middle grade a genre that has seen a lot of success with self-publishing, or is it still more tied to the traditional
yeah,
modes of publishing?
traditional publishing for middle grade is pretty much
Yeah.
it. I know people can and have self-published. It's very hard to get an audience for self.
You can't reach your readers.
No, you
Yeah.
really can't. So it's just there are too many barriers, I think.
Mhm.
So it's mostly traditional publishing, and it's really doing it traditionally, writing a manuscript, finding an agent, doing it the old-fashioned way.
Right.
And that's how most of us have broken into it. But there's also, what's fun about middle grade too is there's also IP projects. People write Star Wars middle grade books. They write, the Babysitter's Club series is still something that exists. And a lot of those come down to finding the publishers who are doing them and pitching them.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of different ways to break in, but a lot of it is just the traditional find an agent, write that book, get traditionally published.
What about breaking it? Like, I mean, if you wanted to say write, a Star Wars middle grade or a Babysitter's Club, and you wanted to pitch for that, would you need to have prior publications? Could you come in cold with a pitch?
Most of the time, you will need to have
Yeah.
prior publications. So especially for the big IP project, there's other kind of like smaller, not as big name as like a Babysitter's Club or Star Wars that are kind of doing these packaged books that you can look into and they'll do them. But a lot of the time, it's easier to get in the door for those too with an agent and with other publications. So yeah, it's kind of really hard to find your way into middle grade and kid lit without going through the proper
Right.
channels to get there. But I'm not to say that to like discourage anyone. If you're into the traditional publishing route, it's just as it's the same for any other traditionally published book. It's the same as if you were trying to get an adult book traditionally published. It's not any harder or easier. I don't think at one point it was a little easier for YA because it was a booming market. I think it's a little oversaturated right now, so it's kind of been evening out. But yeah, it's just the same as any other genre and age category, I think.
Yeah. We're coming to the end of our Wireside Chat, sadly. So I'm going to put another call out for questions into the chat. If anybody has anything, going once, going twice.
Up in the chat, I found the review. It's Blue Boat, not Tugboat. But
Blue Boat. Okay.
Oh, Blue Boat.
Here's that review.
Put it in the chat. This
Okay.
is great.
Did it go?
Okay. Oh God.
Okay. So yeah, it's just very clear that they just hated this picture book, and it's really like we've read the picture. It's just a fine little picture book. Like there's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
So reading is subjective. So never let the bad reviews get you down.
I have a really important question. I was just doing a little more research on you, a little stalking, Nicole.
A little light stalking. No
little
problem.
light stalking. And I noticed that you have written quite a few short nonfiction articles thematically related to your books.
Yeah.
Do you recommend that authors do this? And if so, why?
For me, it was a really nice way of kind of getting who I am and what I'm about and what my books are about out there for the librarians and the teachers and the people who are buying. I'm trying to market the book to. So I think it's great. I highly recommend if you're being published, especially in with kids or teens who maybe you're not getting to sell directly to. They're not the ones with money. It's a nice way of getting who you are and what you're about across. So I've written for Lit Hub, a couple of school library journal articles and whatnot, and those have been really helpful in helping my books find their audience, basically.
And so is that something that you look for the potential subject that you could write about and then pitch it to those venues?
Yeah, some of them I will say that my publisher kind of helped point me in direction and get those kind of set up with me. So that was helpful. And then others, yeah, I just you pitch them to you have to kind of, I think, be aware of what's out there and who's writing what. There's a bunch of different kidlit kind of community blogs and posts and places that you want to kind of be part of, and that's where you'll find various things to pitch to. So there's different like blogs that I've posted with. I know a big one that I've done various essays for, LGBTQreads.com. Dahlia Adler runs that, and it's this website that basically categorizes every YA, kidlit, adult queer book, and you can go in and find them all. It does monthly roundups of books that have come out. There's different articles and conversations with authors in it, so it's something like that I like writing for. LitHub was one that we pitched. My editor suggested that I pitched to it, and then I just pitched to them, and it was something that kind of was I think for the LitHub one, it was when the book challenging started to really see an uptick, so the timing was right for it, and that I think counts a lot too. Not only was my books kind of prevalent about it and coming out, but also it was something that was important at the time as well.
Right. And I know, Melissa, your question was somewhat disingenuous because you also pursue that strategy very well. And I know you're a champion of it. And it's a very smart strategy.
I think it's really awesome to publish short thematically related nonfiction pieces, because you get publicity and you get a paycheck. Nicole, I hope you got a paycheck. It's bonus money and bonus publicity, and it's fun.
Yeah.
Win-win.
Yeah, I agree.
So on that note, I think I'm going to call it for tonight. I want to thank everybody for joining us for a really fun discussion. I want to thank Nicole especially. I wish you luck with your anthology coming out next month. Very excited about that. And please let me know when it comes out so that I can advertise it all over the place.
Yeah, of course.
And Melissa, thank you as ever.
Oh, thank you. That was great.
I hope everyone will join us next month for another Wireside Chat. Until then.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.